My dear friends, what a joy it is to welcome you all to this special event which the Center for Human Rights is both proud and privileged to be hosting over the next 2 days. I'm very sorry to be not in Pretoria today. It's only the second time in 15 years that I am missing the special December events. As some of you might know, we have been accused in the past of trying to save the world through moot courts. For some 5 years now, we have been organizing the World Human Rights Moot Court competition in Pretoria in conjunction with the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. This year, the executors of the estate of Nelson Mandela agreed to rename the competition after him, and so we have brought the show to Geneva to show to the world what a small organization in sub-Saharan Africa is doing to change our world, one human rights lawyer at a time. As you watch this, the opening ceremony is taking place simultaneously in Palais Wilson, and the final will take place in the Human Rights Council, the room with the famous Spanish ceiling, and will be addressed by the new High Commissioner in person. I would like to extend a particularly warm welcome to those of you who are first-time visitors to the Center, and then to all of you who have travelled from far and near to be here, taking leave from work and making all kinds of practical arrangements, as the case may be. Whether you are presenting or simply listening and learning, in gathering here on this occasion, you are all paying a special personal tribute to those who have suffered and continue to suffer discrimination, exclusion, and violence. President Obama put it simply yet profoundly. Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law. For if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well. To the doubting Thomases among us, and there are many, in the end this is simply about human life, life which is unfulfilled and even lost, because some people have had the temerity to love each other. To paraphrase the Universal Declaration, it is equally about how we human beings who claim superior intelligence and the distinguishing characteristic of reason and good conscience have failed to act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. It is about how we inflict the worst treatment on each other simply for being ourselves. We are here because our detractors and opponents are constantly using new methods to undercut our efforts in the fight against discrimination. Political leaders pay lip service to the concepts of dignity, equality, and freedom, and religious leaders seem little bothered that their words sometimes result in grievous bodily harm and even the loss of human life. I suspect the writer Jonathan Swift was having a vision of this present time when he wrote in Gulliver's Travels that human beings are the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth. My dear friends, this is as good a time as any to remember where we come from. The center with which we are so proud to be associated is the product of right-thinking men and women who huddled together during the bitterly cold political winter of apartheid and dared to imagine a different and a better time. In the lion's den that was the University of Pretoria at the time, these people fought the system, not with bullets and stones, but with thoughts, ideas, and dreams, just like those that unite us today. In the words of the famous American broadcast journalist Edward R. Murrow, let us remember then that we are not descended from fearful men, not from men who feared to write, to associate, to speak, and to defend the causes which were, for the moment, unpopular. Today we stand in the shadow of those unfearful men and women, we too are gathered at a conference on anti-discrimination, and we too are inspired by a vision for a better future. This is a powerful historical parallel, the poignancy of which should not be lost on anyone. The choice of this theme to mark our 15-year anniversary was not randomly drawn out of a hat. Let us rededicate ourselves to the vision of those who founded the Centre at that first conference on the Bill of Rights, and prepare to set a new standard in the fight against discrimination. Let us go forward boldly, marked with the sign of the Centre's butterfly, multicolored for the diversity we represent, rising out of an unattractive past and bringing excellence and Ubuntu to the world around us. In a word, let us make today count. This colloquium gives us the opportunity to do two things. First, in an outward way, to examine the work that we are doing across the continent and to strategize and plan. But it also affords us, in a more inward way, an important opportunity to recognize our imperfections and to find ways of singing, if not the same song, then at least from the same sheet. As beneficiaries of an education from the Centre, we bear a certain responsibility. The world expects us to fight for all human rights everywhere, all the time. If we fail to do this, history will not be kind to us. From our side at the Centre for Human Rights, when we started with the advanced human rights courses, and the specific one on sexual minority rights in Africa some 4 or 5 years ago, the aim was, and still is, to empower targeted public officials and civil society leaders with knowledge and skills. Yet inadvertently, some of the greatest beneficiaries have been students on the master's program itself. Many of them experienced great moments of peripeteia, saying after an intensive week, "I just didn't know, Norman. Now I understand." Others, however, felt that we were railroading them or force-feeding them. I remember in one year, after watching the documentary Wubi Sheri, there were notes slipped under my door to say that selected staff members at the Centre would be going to hell. Still, for others, after the usual un-Christian and un-African barriers have been broken down, the doubts still remained, and they would say, "I agree with what you're saying, Norman, but I just know that this is wrong." Slowly, however, people realize that we are talking about fellow human beings who just want to carry on being students, workers, regular taxpayers with boring lives like anyone else. They learn that there is so much more to each one of us than who we have sex with, and that you cannot reduce a person's entire existence to who and how they love. These are baby steps, but we feel vindicated after these few years and will continue to play our part as educators in transferring knowledge and skills. In talking to each other today and tomorrow, let us remember that no one knows it all, and sometimes we are even at cross purposes with each other. If we are humble, however, we will realize the potential of a meeting such as this one, to learn, to share, and to grow. This is a multifaceted battle which needs to be fought simultaneously in courts of law, in parliaments, and even on the streets. In this regard, we all have different talents, and there is so much to do. Some of the questions we might reflect on include the following. What language should we use as lawyers? What strategies should we use as activists? Is the decriminalization of sodomy the silver bullet that we are looking for? What is the real and perhaps the untapped power of religious and political leaders in Africa? In planning the way forward, let us identify achievable results, however modest, and let us be patient because this battle will not be won overnight. The road ahead is still long. No one knows how far the dark tunnel extends, and any light at the end of that tunnel could very well be an oncoming train. As I said, the other aspect of this conference is a sort of introspection, a chance to look into the mirror. Did you know that 100 years ago, women in England, in the middle of the so-called civilized world, did not have the right to vote because science showed that they were lesser human beings on account of smaller brains and other biological characteristics? The thought that someone who lives and breathes, like you and me, was responsible for such an odious idea forces me to share his or her guilt and culpability today. In 100 years from now, I fear that people will look back in shock and horror at the fact that we, who share that same humanity with them, treated some people as lesser human beings because they chose to love others of the same sex. This, therefore, is the time to stand and be counted. When in 100 years our descendants are dying of embarrassment because of our ignorance and foolish ways, let them know that some of us fought for all human rights and not just the ones that everyone agreed upon. Let them know that many of us understood that discrimination humiliates, dehumanizes, and destroys. In his first inauguration speech in 1992, Bill Clinton said, with regards to the distinction between us and them, we should never forget that but for fate, we might have been each other. As students, we learnt that there isn't a hierarchy of rights. We also acknowledge that many people in the world face some very serious human rights challenges. Yet I feel in my heart of hearts that the human rights of LGBTI persons is the question that will define our generation. We all agree that torture is reprehensible and universal basic education is desirable. We agree that our journalists should be free to write the truth and that we should be free to worship God whatever we conceive him to be. We also agree that too many children die of preventable diseases and that too many of our women die in childbirth. Yet, the same we fail to see the LGBTI persons as human beings, and in the process, we lose our own humanity. By we, I don't mean the rest of humankind. Like my mother used to say, it takes all sorts to make the world. No, what I mean is that many of us who have passed through the center itself and who share that common identity, we are not all on the same page. There are some among us who don't think that this is even a human rights question. Others display patent and latent homophobia, recreating hostile home environments right here, where the vulnerable among us ought to feel safest. There are some among us who use innuendo and the hint of blackmail once they find out that you are one of them. Yes, dear friends, it is sobering to know that we are not better than anyone else out there. We are a microcosm of the greater society around us, and we would be foolish if we thought of ourselves as somehow better. Imperfect as we are, however, there are also many stories of courage, sacrifice, and sheer human empathy. Nelson Mandela, Vera Chirwa, and Wole Soyinka are only some of our heroes. Because for every homophobic Nigerian legislator, there is also a Kene Esom. And for every Yoweri Museveni, there is an Adrian Joko. This colloquium celebrates the courage and achievements of all alumni who are working in this area. Activists, judges, lawyers, journalists, cabinet ministers, too many to name individually, but whose courage and shining example is an inspiration to all of us. While we cannot all be on the front lines of this struggle, Mary Robinson challenged us in a fireside chat a couple of years ago to all be active in working for change by using social media to follow, track, identify, name and shame human rights violators. This, more than ever before, is the time to act. We need to challenge the rhetoric and constantly rewrite the script. We need to keep doing something lest we become complicit even by our inactivity. The Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran put it so well when he says, "And as a single leaf turns not yellow but with the silent knowledge of the whole tree, so the wrongdoer cannot do wrong without the hidden will of you all." Human rights activism can be difficult sometimes, and our work will certainly never be done. But then, every once in a lifetime, we meet someone who rocks our world, so to say, and who challenges us to pick up a weapon and stand a post. This is true of Professor Franz Fillon, isn't it? At the top of an impressive list of expert academics and practitioners who have taught generations of us at the center. This is also true of Professor Christoph Haynes and Justice Johann van der Westhuizen, the two previous directors and founders of the center. I am privileged to have learned from all three of them, and I am deeply honored to be associated with all of you. Let us continue to work together towards the ideal of a better Africa and a fairer world. Let us imagine a more just and caring society for everyone, especially the most vulnerable among us, and let us engineer the change we seek using the instruments of law and advocacy. Maya Angelou, the famous African-American writer, used to say, "You are all my children. You are tall and short, black and white, pretty and plain." I feel that the Center for Human Rights is saying the same thing to us today. You are all my children, introvert and extrovert, talkative and contemplative, impulsive and calculating. On our part, we know that we are lesbian and gay, bisexual and intersex. No transsexuals yet, but maybe soon. Each in our own way, let us make this conference an unforgettable milestone in the Center's history, just like the founding members of the Center did at that inaugural conference in 1986. Like them, let us not be discouraged now by the situation that appears to be. Injustice on such a massive scale will falter and fail in the end. Look where South Africa was in 1986 and look where it is today. And then imagine where we could be tomorrow. Thank you and good luck.